The Umbrella Man. I'm going to tell you a funny thing that happened to my mother and me yesterday evening. I'm 12 years old and I'm a girl, and my mother is 34, but I'm nearly as tall as her already. Yesterday afternoon, my mother took me up to London to see the dentist. He found one hole. It was in the back tooth and he filled it without hurting me too much. After that, we went to a cafe. I had a banana split and my mother had a cup of coffee. By the time we got up to leave, it was about 6 o'clock. When we came out of the cafe, it had started raining. "We must get a taxi," my mother said. We were wearing ordinary hats and coats, and it was raining quite hard. "Why don't we go back into the cafe and wait for it to stop?" I said. I wanted another one of those banana splits. They were gorgeous. "It isn't going to stop," my mother said. "We must get home." We stood on the pavement in the rain, looking for a taxi. Lots of them came by, but all of them had passengers inside them. "I wish I had a car with a chauffeur," my mother said. Just then, a man came up to us. He was a small man. He was pretty old, probably 70 or more. He raised his hat politely and said to my mother, "Excuse me, I do hope you would excuse me." He had a fine white moustache, bushy white eyebrows, and a wrinkly pink face. He was sheltering under an umbrella which he held high over his head. "Yes," my mother said in a cool, distant voice. "I was wondering if I could ask you a very small favour," he said. "It is only a very small favour." I saw my mother looking at him suspiciously. She is a suspicious person, my mother. She is especially suspicious of two things: strange men and boiled eggs. When she cuts the top off a boiled egg, she pokes around inside with a spoon, as though expecting to find a mouse or something. With strange men, she has a golden rule, which says, "The nicer the man seems to be, the more suspicious you must become." This little old man was particularly nice. He was polite, well-spoken, very well dressed. He was a gentleman. And the reason I know he was a gentleman was because of his shoes. "You can always spot a gentleman by the shoes he wears," was another one of my mother's favourite sayings. This man had beautiful brown shoes. "The truth of the matter is," the little man was saying, "I've got myself in a bit of a scrape, and I need some help. Not much, I assure you. It's almost nothing, but in fact, I do need it. You see, madam, old people like me often are terribly forgetful." My mother's chin was up and she was staring down at him along the full length of her nose. It was a fearsome thing, this frosty nose stare of my mother's. Most people go completely to pieces when she gives it to them. I saw my own head mistress begin to stammer and simper like an idiot when my mother gave her a really foul frosty noser. But this little man on the pavement with the umbrella over his head, he hadn't batted an eyelid. He gave a gentle smile and said, "I beg you to believe me, madam. I am not in the habit of stopping ladies in the street and telling them my troubles." "I should hope not," my mother said. I felt quite embarrassed by my mother's sharpness. I wanted to say to her, "Oh, mummy, for heaven's sakes, he's a very, very old man, and he's sweet and polite, and he's in some sort of trouble, so don't be so beastly to him." But I didn't say anything. The little man shifted his umbrella from one hand to the other. "I've never forgotten it before," he said. "You've never forgotten what?" my mother asked sternly. "My wallet. I must have left it in my other jacket. Isn't it the silliest thing to do?" "Are you asking me for money?" my mother said. "Oh, good gracious me, no! Heaven forbid I should ever do that," said the old man. "Then what are you asking?" my mother said. "And do hurry up. We're getting soaked to the skin here." "I know you are," he said. "And that is why I am offering you this umbrella of mine to protect you, and to keep it forever, if only—" "If only what?" my mother said. "If only you would give me in return £1 for my taxi fare home." My mother was still suspicious. "If you had no money in the first place," she said, "then how did you get here?" "I walked," he answered. "Every day I go for a lovely long walk, and then I summon a taxi to take me home. I do it every day of the year." "Then why don't you walk home now?" my mother asked. "Oh, I wish I could. I do wish I could, but I don't think I could manage it, especially on these old legs of mine. I've gone too far already." My mother stood there chewing her lower lip. She was beginning to melt a bit, I could see that, and the idea of getting an umbrella to shelter under must have tempted her a good deal. "It's a lovely umbrella," the little man said. "So I've noticed. It's silk, I can see that." "Then, madam, take it, please. It cost me over £20, I promise you. But it's of no importance so long as I can get home and rest these old legs of mine." I saw my mother's hand feeling for a clasp of her purse. She saw me watching her. I was giving her one of my own frosty noses. This time she knew exactly what I was telling her. "Now listen, Mummy," I was telling her. "You simply mustn't take advantage of a tired old man in this way. It's a rotten thing to do." My mother paused and looked back at me, and she said to the little old man, "Oh, I don't think it's quite right that I should take the umbrella from you, especially if it's worth £20. I think I'd rather give you the taxi fare and be done with it." "No, no, no," he cried. "It's out of the question. I wouldn't dream of it. Not in a million years. I would never accept money from you like that. Take the umbrella, dear lady. Keep the rain off your shoulders." My mother gave me a triumphant sideways look. "There you are," she was telling me. "You're wrong. He wants me to have it." She fished into her purse and she took out a £1 note. She handed it out to the little man. He took it and handed her the umbrella. He pocketed the £1, raised his hat, gave a quick bow from the waist, and said, "Thank you, madam, thank you," and he was gone. "Come under here. Keep dry, darling," my mother said. "Aren't we lucky? I've never had a silk umbrella before. We couldn't afford it." "Why were you so horrid to him in the beginning?" I said. "I wanted to satisfy myself he wasn't a trickster," she said, "and I did. He was a gentleman, and I was very pleased I was able to help him." "Yes, Mummy." "A real gentleman," she went on. "Wealthy too. Otherwise he wouldn't have had a silk umbrella. I shouldn't be surprised if he wasn't a titled person, Sir Henry Goldsworthy or something like that." "Yes, Mummy." "This will be a good lesson to you. Never rush into things. Always take your time when you are summing someone up. Then you'll never make mistakes." "There he goes! Look!" "Where?" "Over there. He's crossing the street. Goodness, Mummy, what a hurry he's in." We watched the little man as he dodged nimbly in and out of the traffic. He reached the other side of the street and he turned left and was walking very fast. "He doesn't look very tired to me, does he to you, Mummy?" My mother didn't answer. "He doesn't look like he's trying to get a taxi either," I said. My mother was standing very still and stiff, staring across the street at the little man. We could see him clearly. He was in a terrific hurry. He was bustling along the pavement, sidestepping other pedestrians, swinging his arms like a soldier on the march. "He's up to something," my mother said, stony-faced. "But what?" "I don't know," my mother snapped, "but I'm going to find out. Come with me." She took my arm and we crossed the street together, then turned left. "Can you see him?" "Yes, there he is. He turned right down the next street." We came to the corner and turned right. The little man was about 20 yards ahead of us, and we had to walk very fast to keep up with him. The rain was pelting down harder than ever now, and I could see it dripping from the brim of his hat onto his shoulders. But we were snug and dry under our lovely big silk umbrella. "What is he up to?" my mother said. "What if he turns around and sees us?" I asked. "I don't care if he does," my mother said. "He lied to us. And he said he was too tired to walk any further, and he's practically running us off our feet. He's a barefaced liar. He's a crook." "You mean he's not a titled gentleman?" I asked. "Be quiet." The next crossing the little old man turned right again, then left, and then right. "I'm not giving up now," my mother said. "He's disappeared," I cried. "Where's he gone?" "He went in that door," my mother said. "I saw him. Into that house. Great heavens! It's a pub." It was a pub. The big letters right across the front of it said, "The Red Lion." "You're not going in there, are you, Mummy?" "No," she said. "We'll watch from outside." There was a big plate glass window along the front of the pub, and although it was a bit steamy on the inside, we could see through it well enough if we went close. We stood huddled together outside the pub window. I was clutching my mother's arms. The big raindrops were making a loud noise on the umbrella. "There he is. Over there," I said. The room we were looking into was full of people and cigarette smoke, and our little old man was in the middle of it. He was now without his coat and hat, and he was edging his way through the crowd towards the bar. When he reached it, he placed both hands on the bar itself and spoke to the barman. I saw his lips moving as he gave his order. The barman turned away from him for a few seconds and came back with a smallish glass filled to the brim with light brown liquid. The little old man placed a pound note on the counter. "That's my pound," my mother hissed. "By golly, he's got a nerve." "What's in the glass?" I asked. "Whiskey," my mother said. "Neat whiskey." The barman didn't give him any change for the pound. "That must have been a triple. It's 3 times the normal measure." The little man picked up the glass and put it to his lips, and he tilted it gently. Then he tilted it higher and higher and higher, and very soon all of the whiskey had disappeared down his throat in one long pour. "That's a jolly expensive drink," I said. "It's ridiculous," my mother said. "Fancy paying a pound note for something you swallow in one go." "It cost him more than a pound," I said. "It cost him 20 pounds, the silk umbrella." "So it did," my mother said. "He must be mad." The little man was standing by the bar with his empty glass in his hands. He was smiling now. A sort of golden glow of pleasure was spreading all over his round pink face. I saw his tongue come out and lick his white moustache, as though searching for one last drop of that precious drink. Slowly he turned away from the bar, and edging his way back through the crowd to where his hat and his coat were hanging. He put on his hat, he put on his coat, and then in a manner so superbly cool and casual you would hardly notice anything at all, he lifted from the coat rack one of the many wet umbrellas hanging there, and off he went. "Did you see that?" my mother shrieked. "Did you see what he did?" "Shh!" I whispered. "He's coming out." We lowered our umbrella and hid our faces. We peered out under it. Out he came, but he never looked in our direction. He opened his new umbrella over his head and scurried off down the road in the way he had come. "So that's his little game," my mother said. "That's neat," I said. "Super." We followed him back to the main street where we had first met him, and we watched him as he proceeded with no trouble at all to exchange his new umbrella for another pound note, and this time it was with a tall, thin fellow who didn't even have a hat or coat. And as soon as this transaction was completed, our little man trotted off down the street and was lost in the crowd. But this time he went in the opposite direction. "Do you see how clever he is? He never goes into the same pub twice." "He could go on doing this all night," I said. "Yes," my mother said, "of course, but I bet he prays like mad for rainy days." And that is the end of the story of the Umbrella Man.